evening's Family Forum. I would like to introduce our Spanish translator. Would the Spanish translator please come on board and provide instructions for our Spanish-speaking families?
Muy buenas tardes, mi nombre es Rafael y voy a ser el intérprete de español. Quería pedirles el favor de que si quieren escuchar la conferencia que vamos a dar esta tarde en español, pueden hacer clic en la figura o el icono del globo que aparece en la parte inferior de la pantalla y de esta manera puede elegir español para escuchar la conferencia. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Rafael. Will the Nepali translator please introduce yourself and provide instructions?
नमस्ते म ममता घिमिरे हो नेपाली दोभाषी हजुरहरू चाहिँ आज यो कोभिडको ट्रेसिङ कसरी गर्ने यहाँ इन्फर्मेसन प्रोभाइड गरिँदैछ अनि अहिले तपाईहरुलाई एकछिनमा यहाँ तल एउटा डल्लो जस्तो उयो आउँछ त्यसमा चाहिँ नेपाली भनेर आउँछ त्यसमा क्लिक गर्नुभयो भने तपाईले नेपालीबाट मात्रै सुन्न सक्नुहुन्छ धन्यवाद.
Thank you very much. Will the Arabic translator please provide directions?
مرحبا أنا جيهان عايش أشكركم لانضمامكم إلينا في اجتماع أهالي الطلاب في مدارس مديرية التربية بمدينة روتشستر. في غضون دقائق قليلة سيتم تشغيل خدمة الترجمة الفورية وبعدها ستظهر أيقونة الكرة الأرضية في أسفل الشاشة أمامكم. للاستماع إلى الاجتماع اليوم باللغة العربية يرجى النقر على أيقونة الكرة الأرضية واختيار اللغة العربية من القائمة التي ستظهر أمامكم. بالإضافة إلى ذلك يرجى كتم الصوت باللغة الإنجليزية حتى تتمكنوا من التركيز على اللغة العربية فقط. للقيام بذلك يرجى النقر على أيقونة الكرة الأرضية مرة أخرى واختيار كتم الصوت باللغة الإنجليزية أسفل قائمة اللغات مباشرة. شكرا لكم مرة أخرى لانضمامكم إلينا.
Thank you very much. Again, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Family Forum, where we will share important information about the district's process for COVID-19 reporting and contact tracing. We will also be holding a question and answer session for families. And before we get started, I would like to introduce Superintendent Dr. Leslie Myers-Small, who will provide greetings this evening. Dr. Myers-Small.
Thank you, Marisol, and good evening, everyone. We are so thrilled that you took time out of your very busy schedules to participate in our Family Forum relative to COVID-19 reporting and testing. You will find that tonight's presentation is incredibly informative. Stacey Darby, who's our coordinator of environmental health, is a wealth of information. And if her presentation certainly doesn't answer your questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will make sure that we follow up. Thank you for participating, and I'll turn the evening back over to Marisol. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Myers-Small. It's my pleasure now to introduce Stacey Darby, who will be presenting this evening's presentation.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I am Stacey Darby, the Coordinator of Environmental Health and Safety. I do have a presentation that I'm going to be sharing, so I'm going to get that up right now to share with all of you. Maybe, give me a second. All right, I think it's good. Oh. Sorry that they're a little, went ahead on me. Sorry about that. So let me I just have to move something out of the way here and then I'll start talking to everyone. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be talking about the process for COVID-19 reporting and contact tracing inside of the district. This process, to be perfectly honest, is a lot. We do work with and when I say a lot, there's a lot of information that really impacts when someone will be quarantined versus when they can come out of quarantine, when an isolation happens, and hopefully when I get through my presentation, you guys will all have that knowledge as well. And just like Dr. Myers-Small said, we're available for questions as well. So first of all, let's start with how do we find out about a case? We find out about cases from the Monroe County Department of Health, or we notify them if we find out about a case first here at the district. So sometimes a parent may take a child to the doctor, they find out that the child is positive, they call their school, that information is sent up to the contact tracing group, And then we notify the county to let them know that we have a positive case. And then the other way that it can happen is that someone is found to be positive, and the county provides the district a list 2 times a day with all of the positive cases that are associated with the school district, which is, oh, my next bullet, sorry, I jumped ahead. So we also all used and I'll say studied the New York State contact tracing program to make sure that we're doing and all of the right steps when we're contact tracing. So how do I find out about a positive COVID-19 case? If your child is identified as a close contact, which I'm going to talk more about what that means in just a second, you will be notified as soon as possible from your school. Your child will be excluded from school until they are released from quarantine, and I'll give more information about what that means as well. And your child will be placed in quarantine officially by the Monroe County Department of Health, and you'll receive even more information from them. So from the school, you'll receive a call to say that your child is placed in quarantine. And you'll also receive a letter if they were in school when that happened to go home with your child. And then the county calls you and gives you all of the other details that you need to know. Only families that have a student that is identified as a close contact will receive a call from the school regarding individual cases. Family notifications, so every case that happens in the district gets notified weekly on Thursday via robocall from your child's school. You can also access the district website at www.rcsdk12.org/COVID-19 for a list of cases by school. And this is updated by the end of the day weekly on Fridays. So what is a close contact? I talked about that just a little bit, but a close contact is an individual who is with you. So if I'm the positive person, an individual who is with me within 48 hours before I noticed my symptoms of COVID-19 through today. Or if I didn't have any symptoms at all, it would be on the day that I took the test, not the day that I got my results. Also, the individual has to be closer than 6 feet to me for more than 15 minutes, and one or both of us were not wearing a mask. So let me just say that another way because it's confusing, and I know that it can be. So if I am with, I'm going to use a lunch example, right? So I'm at lunch with my friend Lori, and we are together, and it's on Sunday, and I start to not feel well on Monday. She would be someone who is a close contact because I was with her for longer than 15 minutes within 6 feet, and we both were not wearing our mask. Now, if I was in an office, if I was at work and I was wearing my mask, but my friend Lori was not, and she was with me for longer than 15 minutes within 6 feet, she would still need to be identified as a close contact because it's 2 masks, not just one. When a positive case is identified, we send the student's name and isolation dates, which is the amount of time that they will be isolated, which is their infectious period. If they're known, are sent to the building principal, the school chief, the school nurse, and transportation to determine if there are any close contacts. The schools also work with the school's teacher, or the child's teacher, to identify any close contacts as well. Oops, not switching. There we go. Close contacts are identified again by determining if there was anyone who was within 6 feet of the student for longer than 15 minutes of another child. Those children will be identified as close contacts. Once close contacts are identified, the information is returned to the COVID-19 response team and to the County Department of Health. So why do we contact trace? We contact trace to remove a person, a close contact, that is exposed to COVID-19. This is done to prevent spread in case the close contact eventually tests positive. And I will say that nowhere near all of the close contacts test positive. That's actually a pretty low number, but it's done because this is the way that we can prevent the spread of COVID-19. At least in our school setting right here, close contacts can test positive outside of school, especially in family settings where they have extended periods of contact with the person who's positive. Close contacts are quarantined for 10 days post-exposure. So what does that mean? I'm going to use that situation again, where I am the positive person. I was in school as infectious. So that means even before I had symptoms, I'm infectious 48 hours before. So I was in school on the 20th and the 21st. I started to feel bad on the evening of the 21st, and I didn't come to school on the 22nd. So they're going to identify anyone who was a close contact to me for the 20th and the 21st. And the last date of contact with that person. So if I ate, again, I'll use Lori. If I ate with Lori on the 21st, that would be her start date for exposure. So she would get quarantined from the 21st, it was 30 months in September, through the 1st, and would be able to come back to school on the 2nd. So that's kind of how the quarantine time frame works. And the reason for that is because the 10 days is what we're looking at for how long a person could potentially become sick with COVID. You cannot test out of quarantine at this time. That is not an option. Testing is recommended when you have an exposure. It's recommended between days 5 and 7. If you're not vaccinated. If you are vaccinated, it's recommended between days 3 and 5. And I'll talk more about what happens with vaccinated people in just a little bit. Close contacts, the notification. So families will receive a call from the building to notify them that their child was identified as a close contact to a student that is positive for COVID. That child will not be able to attend school until the county releases them from quarantine. So that's that date that I just talked about before, that last date of contact. Information is also provided to the families on what to do while waiting for that call. And that includes things like once you get your student home, trying to keep them away from other people in the family, using masking if you have to accomplish that, but really setting up a space that keeps that child who's being quarantined away from the rest of the family. Vaccinated symptom-free contacts will not be placed in quarantine. So if a student or a staff member, for that matter, are vaccinated, they still are reported as a close contact. Families of exposed vaccinated students will still get a call from the county tracers to confirm that that student's vaccination status and that the child is symptom-free. So as long as someone stays symptom-free and is vaccinated and it's confirmed, they can remain in school. Masking is required at all times for 14 days post-exposure. You can take the mask off to eat, but there has to be space provided at that point, that's 6 feet of space. And testing is recommended by the CDC at 3 to 5 days post-exposure, even if you remain symptom-free. Contact tracing outside of school. Only close contacts that happen at school are identified by the district and shared with the county. So to just give an example of that, if I get a ride with my friend, I'm Stacey, I need a ride to school, I ride to school with my friend Jessica. If I ride to school with my friend Jessica, when that contact tracing happens through the county, they're going to ask you about your child's close contacts. That is when you tell them about Jessica being a close contact to me, because the school wouldn't necessarily have that information that you get a ride to school with someone else, or you play with someone out of school, or you go to someone's house for babysitting or daycare or anything like that. All of that would come from the family interview with the county. It is extremely important that families of positive students answer calls from state and county contact tracers. When they call, it says, if you have caller ID, it says contact tracer on the call when they call, and answer all questions about close contacts out of school, including family members. Again, contacts that happen outside of school are identified by the county when they speak to the family of the positive case. Please be sure to let the county contact tracers know, like I said, if you carpool with other families, you go to daycare with another family, Any contact that you have outside of school, you need to let them know. We only identify contacts that happen inside of school or at a school activity. And I'm just taking a minute to let our translators catch up because I talk too fast and I'm trying very hard to not do that, so I apologize. Okay. And I'll start talking again. All right, I'm going to start back up and try to talk even slower than I think I am because I talk very quickly. And again, I apologize for that. Okay, so if we have a positive case, so that means the person has tested positive for COVID-19 and the person is in isolation. So that means that they cannot go anywhere, just like quarantine. But the difference is this person is actually positive. So anyone that was a contact with them would have to be placed on quarantine. When someone is on quarantine, there are no exposures to that person. So everyone else in the house can go and do what they need to do as long as that person stays symptom-free and does not test positive for COVID. People who test positive for COVID-19 are put in isolation by the county. Isolation dates are determined when the county interviews the family of the positive child. Isolation is 10 days from the onset of symptoms or the date of the positive test if they're asymptomatic. So now I want to give an example of something that has happened. It doesn't happen super frequently, but it does happen where people say, how is this student, like someone that they know who is positive, whether they're a close contact, whether they're a friend, whether they're a teacher, how is this person back in school already when we just learned of their positive case? So remember, we go back to symptom start date, and the county starts at the mild, even a mild symptom. So if I'm a student and I wake up and I have a scratchy throat, and it's itchy and it's scratchy and my nose is a little stuffy, but I maybe don't really say anything until I get home that day, or maybe it clears up really fast and I don't really say anything, and I go to school for 2 or 3 days and then I get a fever, right? And then my mom says, okay, you have a fever, you can't go to school. And then I'm like, oh, you know what? My throat's been scratchy for a couple days. That can happen, right? The kids may not, even if parents are asking, as they should be, if their kids are feeling okay every morning. Sometimes kids aren't going to share, or it doesn't feel that different to them. Symptoms can be pretty mild in kids to begin with, or stay mild throughout the entire time they're positive. So let's use that example, right? So on the 20th, I start to not feel well, but I'm not feeling terrible and I don't really say anything. On the 23rd, I wake up with a fever. My mom says, okay, you can't go to school. I can't get in to see my doctor until, let's say, the 25th. For whatever reason, that's the first appointment that's available. So I go in on the 25th and I'm tested for COVID. Now it can take up to 2 days or 3, but most of them are back in 2 or 1. But let's say it takes 1 day, right? So where was I? I said I went on the 25th. My test comes back on the 26th. The 26th is a weekend, so my parent can't call. It's not really probably, but I'm just using it because it's easy dates. The 26th is a weekend, so my parents can't really call the school to let them know what's going on. The Department of Health gets the case, right? Remember, we can get the cases either from the parent telling us or from the Department of Health telling us. Department of Health gets the case. They reach out to the parent. That can take a day or 2 for that process to happen. So I was on the 26th. Now I'm on the 27th or even the 28th. And that child started feeling bad on the 20th. So they're back in school. 30th is the end. They're back in school on the 1st, and the notification went out on the 28th. Now, like I said, that doesn't happen often, but it can happen sometimes. And it's very confusing when that happens for people. So I wanted to share that example. Again, it's not happening all of the time, but it does happen where we have cases that take that long through no fault of anyone. for us to know what's going on with that case. I finished that one, I did it. So if there's an adult, the process is very similar, except that the adult is involved in the contact tracing process, either directly or through their supervisor. And adults that allow the district to verify their vaccination status will not have to go home at all, provided they are symptom-free. So we interview them, we get information so we can verify that status, and then they can stay at home. They're still counted as a contact trace, but they can stay in school as long as those two things are there. And then they also have to follow the same rules. And this is an adult who is exposed, not an adult who's positive. Regardless of vaccine status, if you're positive, you're placed in isolation. So I just want to clarify that because this is under the positive case adult, and there should be like another little thing here that says adults that are exposed, and I apologize for that. That's my fault. So again, vaccinated staff that remain or return to school after being identified as a close contact must remain masked at all times for 14 days post-exposure. Just like kids, rules are the same. Masks can be removed to eat, and testing is strongly recommended at 3 to 5 days post-exposure. Taking another drink, so I slow down. Okay, students. Students can be tested for COVID-19 weekly at their school. The test is a self-administered shallow swab test. So any student that's capable of giving the test to themselves is going to be handed a swab out of it's a sterile swab out of the little swab baggie, for lack of a better word. They're given the swab, they're told how to give themselves the test. And basically what they're doing is taking the swab and they're directed to put it just up inside their nose to about there. And then they're going to swirl it around 5 times on this side, take it out, do the same thing on this side. They're in their nose, and they're going to swirl it around 5 times on that side. They're not really putting the swab any farther than their finger would go. Actually, their finger probably could go higher in their nose than the swab is supposed to go. If a student needs help administering the test, then the Walgreens staff who's doing the testing, they can help that student swab. For students, testing is voluntary and it's only performed with parental consent. You may have gotten information at the beginning of the school year regarding this, but if you can't find it anymore because you said there are too many papers on my kitchen table and I took them all and put them in the recycling, because I've definitely had that moment already. You can find more information at www.rcsk12.org/COVID consent. And that's where you can find information by school. Please be sure that you click your child's school. If you have children in multiple schools, you will have to go to each school information page because the consent code, or the code you need, I shouldn't call it the consent code, the code you need to register online is different for each building. And also vaccination information. I cannot stress, all of your children's doctors, please talk to them if you have questions. The importance of getting children who are eligible and families who are eligible vaccinated against COVID-19. Appointments are available for everyone 12 and up. Pfizer is currently the only vaccine available for those 12 to 17. For more information, visit www.monroecounty.gov/health-COVID-19 or call 585-753-5555 to schedule an appointment. You can also find appointments at the Finger Lakes Vaccine Hub at www.flvaccinehub.com. And I don't think you need the /. I think that was hanging on there from something else, but it should still work. And now we have come to the portion of the presentation where we can take any questions. And I'm going to stop sharing so that we can do that. Marisol? Oh, there you are. Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, no. Marisol, we can't hear you. Can you hear me? We can't hear you.
How about now?
Yes.
Hear me? Ah, my apologies. So everybody's having technical issues today. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and now me. So thank you very much, Stacey, for your presentation, your expertise, your knowledge. You are absolutely invaluable to the district, and we are so lucky to have you. I have opened up the chat on the webinar, so any family member who is interested in submitting a question, please do so. As many of you know, Facebook has been down, so we were not able to transmit this webinar live, but it will be available on our webpage and our YouTube page for reviewing after this is completed. Anyone on YouTube who has questions can do so on the chat. We have staff standing by, looking at the YouTube chat, making sure that we answer all of your questions. Our first question is, have any COVID concerns come up with fall interscholastic sports, and what will COVID safety procedures be for winter sports?
Sure. So, so far, fall sports have been going really well. The fact that most of it takes place outside has led itself to being a very safe activity happening so far this year. We have not had any case transmission inside of our athletics so far this year for fall. As far as winter or any of our inside sports, the precautions that are currently in place are that everyone must remain masked even when they're participating, just like we were kind of at the end or beginning, I don't even know, winter of last year, I'll say. So those were the same precautions that we had in place. We are also still limiting the amount of spectators inside of a building so that we can keep distancing for those spectators. They also must remain masked at all times inside of the building.
And we do have a spectator policy that parents can access on our webpage. Can you go over the testing requirements and how families can sign their child up for testing at school? That's one of the questions that came through the chat.
Sure. So if you go to the district webpage, and sorry, I just lost my train of thought because I can't remember. I was trying to remember what it was called. COVID consent, yes. So you're going to / district webpage / COVID consent. You'll see information there. And what you're going to want to do is click on the specific school that your child attends. And you will have, there's step-by-step directions there. First of all, it starts with going to walgreens.com. And then I'll, kind of walk through a little bit of it going through walgreens.com. And then from there, it'll say, would you like to schedule a test? You're going to click yes. And then a screen shows up and you have to say, yes, I want to do that. You have to click a little box, hit yes. You're going to start to enter information. And then it's going to ask you for two pieces of information that are on the instructions that, of course, I cannot remember what each one is called right now, but one of them is a short little code and one of them is a longer code. You have to put group and plan ID. Thank you. It's the group and plan ID. So you have to put those in when you're making your appointment, or else it'll think you are just a regular user of the Walgreens site. After you put that in, you'll be, and you hit the screen. This is very important, actually. So I'm glad I get to share this. You're going to put all of that information in. type in the group and plan ID, and then hit your screen with your mouse anywhere else outside of that box, or hit tab outside of your box, and then it'll allow you to move forward. It thinks you're still typing if you don't do that. And we've actually had that problem for a couple people. So anyways, do that. And then once you're in there, all the information you'll need to know is there, and there'll be a consent in there as well as you move forward.
So can you give that website again, please?
Sure. It is, what does our website start with? www.rcsdk12.org/COVID consent.
Okay. So our next question is, if my child is quarantined, why aren't their siblings quarantined?
So if your child is quarantined, it's because your child was exposed to someone who is positive, but is not currently positive. So they have no close contacts because they're not sick. So no one else in the house is impacted by that quarantine, except for that everyone should do their best to stay away from the child who is quarantined. And if you can do that, that child could go through the full 10 days, never become symptomatic, never contract COVID, comes back to school. But if that child did become symptomatic, if your other children were kept from that child and it was more than 48 hours, your other children may not have to quarantine. The Department of Health would make those specific decisions because that's outside of the school realm, but it also greatly reduces the risk of anyone else in the house contracting COVID because you've reduced the exposure to that positive or to that exposed child, right? So we don't have to stay away from people that are just home because they were exposed, and we don't have to keep home other people because they were exposed to someone who is not positive yet.
All right. What if my child or I become symptomatic during quarantine?
If if anyone becomes symptomatic during quarantine, you will get your call from the Department of Health every day. They'll ask you about that. You want to be truthful and tell them that you've become symptomatic. They'll direct you to get tested, which is what you absolutely should do. And then based on those test results, you'll either be positive for COVID, at which point your quarantine would be converted to isolation, and any close contacts in the home. So 48 hours, all those other rules that were there, 48 hours, 6 feet, unmasked. Sometimes in the homes, they look at it a little differently, but that's on the county contact tracing side. So that person would be converted to someone who's positive. They would be placed in isolation for the 10 days from when they started to not feel well. And that's basically what happens if you start to feel symptomatic. If you test negative, you still can't leave quarantine. So let's say I wind up with, I'm on quarantine and I get a stuffy nose and I'm negative for COVID. They are not going to release me from quarantine. I still have to complete that full quarantine.
So why haven't I received a call from the Monroe County Department of Health in that instance?
So when cases are come into school and we have a positive case and we identify those close contacts, we immediately contact families of close contacts, like as soon as they're identified. And then we send that information to the county, who is a day, sometimes 2 behind on the information that they get from us. But that's why we send the information home on what to start doing while you're waiting for that call.
So that is what I have for questions, both on YouTube and in the chat. I'm not sure if any of our participants have any more questions, so we're going to give you a few seconds to write them in the chat, and we will happily provide a response.
One thing that I did want to talk about while we're waiting for, I just got a little memory spark. While we're waiting, if there are any other questions, what should I do if my child isn't feeling well? If your child isn't feeling well, please keep them home. They absolutely cannot come into school. The next thing that you need to do is contact your child's healthcare provider and have them come in for a consultation. We'll check on them. Sometimes they'll do it over telehealth or telemedicine. And the other thing is they have to have a negative COVID test if they have symptoms of COVID and there isn't another reason for them to have those symptoms that is a valid excuse, essentially. So the county has very strict rules on what can be accepted as a reason for not COVID testing when someone's symptomatic. One of them may be if I had strep throat, right? So if they do a test for strep throat and I had a sore throat, that's but just having a cold or allergies, something like that is not going to be a sufficient excuse. If a child has allergies and they're known to have allergies and the symptoms are consistent with their typical symptoms, that child may not need to COVID test, but we would still work with the child's healthcare provider to determine that. So most importantly, if your child wakes up and is not feeling well, do not send them to school. And then they have to have a negative COVID test in almost every case to return to school.
Thank you so much, Stacey. We don't have any more questions on our chat nor on YouTube.
I just saw one pop up. I'm going to take a quick look at it.
So if the COVID symptoms are similar to cold and flu, how can I keep my child safe because of these symptoms?
So cold and flu symptoms are a reason for other children to stay home or staff members for that matter. As far as keeping your child safe, making sure that they wear their mask properly, telling them to wear their mask at all times, except for when they're eating or having a drink, are the ways that you can keep your child safe. If they're over 12, getting them vaccinated. And when vaccine approval comes for the younger group of children, getting them vaccinated as well. But as far as the keeping them safe from someone with cold or flu symptoms, if the child is identified at school who isn't feeling well, they are sent down to the nurse where they're evaluated. And if those symptoms are found to be symptoms of COVID, those children would be sent home and they would have to have a COVID test. And then we would, if your child was a close contact, they would be identified.
So what is considered a close contact? And does this include time on the playground?
Sure. So a child is, or anyone is considered a close contact. If I am with them, I'm the positive person. If I am with you for longer than 15 minutes, unmasked, inside, within 6 feet. So playgrounds wouldn't be considered it because they're outside, but also they wouldn't be considered because children are staying masked when they're outside. So because both masks are on, they wouldn't be considered a close contact. Only when one or both of those masks were off would the close contact happen. So again, 6 feet, 15 minutes unmasked, and within 48 hours of that person being positive. So if I haven't been to school since it's Thursday and I haven't been to school since Monday, there'd be no close contacts for me.
So what happens now that families are carpooling because of our transportation situations with contact tracing, Stacey? I know that the classroom contact tracing happens, but what happens to those people who play together on play dates or on a playground that may not be masked, or any families who are providing rides to other family members or students?
Sure. So one thing that everyone could do with rides is if everyone wore a mask, they wouldn't be identified as a close contact. So if the students driving together to school and the adults driving all wore a mask, there would be no close contacts identified. But if you choose not to wear a mask, that is a choice that's made. And you would then, if I'm going to say I'm the positive child, when they call my dad and say, oh, we see here, the county calls and says, we see here that Stacey is positive for COVID. Does she have any close contacts? They would explain what a close contact is to my dad. And then my dad would have to say, she drives to school with Lori. And she was with Lori on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday driving to school, and they don't wear a mask in the car. That wouldn't happen on the school's end because we don't have information about what happens outside of school. So please be sure to share that information. No one is in trouble when you share information about a close contact. You know, you do have to quarantine, but that's for the safety of everyone. But you don't get in trouble because you have a close contact. You're not scolded because you have a close contact. But it is very important that you share those close contacts with the county.
Thank you. If my child is ill and stays home and has no COVID symptoms, do they still need a doctor's note to return to school?
I guess it would depend on why they were ill, right? So there are some symptoms that do not align with COVID. And if they are not aligning with COVID, they would not need a note to come back to school. You could reach out to your school nurse specifically to make sure that you fall into the I don't need a COVID test to return bracket.
So testing is available at the school.
It
We
is.
do have vaccination sites throughout the county that families can go and receive their vaccine. How old are children able to receive the vaccine?
Sure. So anyone aged 12 and older right now are currently eligible to get the COVID-19 vaccine. And I did read exciting news that on October 24th, I believe it is, the FDA has already reserved the date to review the Pfizer data on the, I don't remember if it's 4 through 11 or 5 through 11 group. Geez, I can't remember now, but it's either the 4 through 11 or 5 through 11-year-old group. So after they do their review, again, they have it reserved. They are waiting for the data to come back into them. They'll do their review. Once they finish that final review, we'll have information on that. And then there's a very good chance that vaccine will be available for those aged 5 to 11. I think it's 5 because I just said it, and that means that's probably what it is.
And so as soon as that information comes out, we'll have that posted on our social media.
Absolutely. And we'll also share where those appointments are going to be available because it is a different dose for those younger kids than for the older kids. So the dose changes for kids 5 to 11 versus kids 12 through adult.
Well, it seems that we are out of questions. Stacey, I want to thank you again for your time, your talent, and your dedication to the Rochester City School District, our scholars, teachers, and staff. To all our families who have joined us, thank you very much for being with us this evening. Please make sure that you reach out to your child's school with any additional questions. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon in our next Family Forum.
Thank you, everyone.